We have a broad level of tools to deal with misconduct, overreach, and abuse of power. And the Supreme Court has not been receiving the adequate oversight necessary in order to preserve their own legitimacy. And in the process, they themselves have been destroying the legitimacy of the court, which is profoundly dangerous for our entire democracy.
The Supreme Court has a number of landmark rulings that ticked a lot of people off. We're going to talk about it. I'm your host, Hyde. This is Hide and Seek Media. Hello, all you beautiful and amazing people. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the show. If you're new to the channel here at Hide and Seek Media, what I'm trying to do is bring you a blue-collar, common-sense perspective on politics, sports, and culture. So, like I said in the beginning here, the Supreme Court has had a number of landmark rulings over the last week or so, and a lot of people are not happy. We're going to talk about just how unhappy some of these people are and the landmark rulings that the Supreme Court has done that have made these people so unhappy. Now, not everybody's unhappy about it. There are some people who believe that some of these rulings are justified and need to be done. And we'll discuss that as well. So one of the landmark rulings that the Supreme Court made was striking down Joe Biden's college debt cancellation plan or whatever, which I think was a no-brainer, right? That you're not going to cancel someone's debt that they willingly incurred to go to school, right? A lot of them who got degrees that they don't even use and spent the 4 years that they went to school barely passing their classes while partying it away and, living up the good life, so to speak, as a college student. Now they're complaining that they have to pay for it. Welcome to the real world, right? You finally got out of school and realized that the real world's going to kick you in the teeth and then put its foot on your neck and hold you down until you decide to stand up. And when you do stand up, you're going to have to fight all the way to get to your feet. It's not going to let you up easy. That's what happens. Deal with it. Another one of the landmark rulings, or one that we're going to talk about the most in today's video, is the rejecting of affirmative action, applying affirmative action to college applications, which is going to lead to rejecting affirmative action pretty much in any scenario. If you can reject it in college applications, you're going to be able to reject it in work applications as well. And, we can just kind of do away with affirmative action. And we're going to talk about why this was the right ruling to make. But first, I want to kind of jump into why some of these people are mad and just how far they're willing to take it being as mad as they are. Right. The one that's most famous, and I mean, you've probably heard it already, but it's, the one and only AOC, who cannot keep her mouth shut when it comes to stuff like this and has been attacking the Supreme Court ever since she got elected into the House. But this article here from Fox News says AOC proposes subpoenas and impeachment to limit SCOTUS justices' power following landmark decisions. Democrats have called the Supreme Court illegitimate following landmark rulings this past week. Illegitimate. Now, obviously, they're mad that it's a majority conservative and that 3 or 4, I'm not sure exactly how many, I think it's at least 3 justices were appointed by Trump. So that really irks them a lot. And so they've been attacking the Supreme Court ever since 2016. And this is just another way for them to try and gain more power, right? AOC says that they are creeping closer to authoritarianism with their ruling on affirmative action, right? So it says here in the article, Democratic squad member Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, slammed the U.S. Supreme Court for what she called an abuse of power, Sunday following landmark decisions this past week rejecting affirmative action and Biden's student loan debt plan. She proposed impeachment and subpoenas to put into play in order to limit the justice's power. The Supreme Court is far overreaching their authority, Ocasio-Cortez said in CNN's State of the Union. And I believe, frankly, that we really need to have conversations about judicial review as a check on the courts as well, she added. Judicial review on the Supreme Court. They're the Supreme Court, right? Okay. It's funny how these elected officials think that they are above the court. They're completely separate, right? You're legislative, they're judicial. Hello, completely different separate branches, and that's why we have them, so you check and balance each other. But let's go on and continue what Fox has to say here. The Supreme Court issued the last decisions of the term last past week, among them rejecting the use of race as a factor in admissions, ruling in favor of a Christian web designer who refuses to make a same-sex wedding websites, and striking down President Biden's student loan debt cancellation plan. Democrats have considered the rulings to be an attack, have considered the rulings to be attacks on the left, denouncing the court as illegitimate. Right? It says here, these are the types of rulings that signal a dangerous creep toward authoritarianism and centralization of power in the courts, Ocasio-Cortez said on Sunday. Quote, in fact, we have members of the court themselves, like Justice Elena Kagan, saying that the court is beginning to assume the power of a legislator. Now, no. What the court is doing is deeming whether the application of affirmative action is legal in this instance. And they said, no, judging somebody's admission based on their race is illegal. Period. So, you can't do it. That's what they're saying. Pretty soon, it's going to be somebody's going to sue over not getting a job because of their skin tone or whatever, and it's going to domino. And everybody who pays attention knows this, including these Democrats who are complaining about it, and they know they're losing ground, right, on the control they have over the populace, and it's freaking them out a little bit, and so they are doing crazy crap like what Ocasio-Cortez is doing here. Ocasio-Cortez has been a vocal proponent for court packing and limiting the court's power, going as far as to tell CNN's Dana Bash that subpoenas and impeachment should be placed on the table for consideration. Quote, and so I believe that if Chief Justice Roberts will not come before Congress for an investigation voluntarily, I believe that we should be considering subpoenas, end quote. We should be considering investigations. We must pass much more binding and stringent ethics guidelines where we see members of the Supreme Court potentially breaking the law, as we saw in the refusal with Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from cases implicating his wife in January 6th. Now, should Thomas have recused himself? Maybe. I don't know. Didn't really dig into that. But Clarence Thomas has been on the Supreme Court for a very long time. And in the realm of law, Clarence Thomas is well respected. His decisions are well received and well respected. So, when someone like Ocasio-Cortez, who's a bartender with a freaking BS degree in whatever she got it in, who I think it's economics, but I don't believe that, right? Because she doesn't seem like she has the smarts to have an economics degree. Either that or they were handing those things out at NYU like, Pez dispensers. But the reason why I kind of wanted to stop there with Clarence Thomas is because, like I said before, his decisions and opinions are respected. And I wanted to get to one of those decisions, or he that he wrote about this affirmative action decision, right? So I found this story here from timcast.com. Clarence Thomas criticizes Ketanji Brown Jackson in concurring opinion on affirmative action decision. Supreme Court Justice Thomas says Justice Brown Jackson is viewing Black Americans as victims. The court ruled that college and universities may not consider an applicant's race as a factor for during the admissions process, writing that affirmative action policies in higher education unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. Though much of that debate was within the realm of social media, one exchange was among the only two African American justices on the court. In a concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas excoriated freshman Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who relied on several historical examples of disparities and racial discrimination to, in Thomas's words, label all blacks as victims. The full Supreme Court decision can be viewed here. If you want, go to this website and then click this link. It says Thomas's concurring opinion begins on 49 of the document, while Brown Jackson's dissenting opinion begins on 209 of the document. Brown Jackson stated in the first line of her opinion that Gulf-sized race-based gaps exist with respect to health, wealth, and well-being of American citizens, which she argues have been passed down to the present day. She also included multiple statistics on an array of issues, including student debt, racial composition of CEOs at Fortune 500 companies, and even health. Yet, Thomas wrote that none of those statistics are capable of drawing a direct causal link between race, rather than socioeconomic status or any other factor, and individual outcomes. Thomas continued, Jackson locks blacks into a seemingly perpetual inferior caste. Such a view is irrational. It is an insult to individual achievement and cancerous to young minds seeking to push through barriers, rather than consign themselves to permanent victimhood. If an applicant has less financial means, because his generational inheritance or otherwise, then surely a university may take that into account. If an applicant has medical struggles or family member with medical concerns, a university may consider that too. What it cannot do is use the applicant's skin color as a heuristic, assuming that because the applicant checks the box for black, he therefore conforms to the university's monolithic and reductionist view of an abstract average black person. Accordingly, Justice Jackson's race-infused worldview falls flat at each step. Individuals are the sum of their unique experiences, challenges, and accomplishments. What matters is not the barriers they face, but how they choose to confront them. And their race is not to blame for everything, good or bad, that happens in their lives. A contrary, myopic worldview based on individual skin color to the total exclusion of their personal choices is nothing short of racial determinism. So Clarence Thomas basically goes on to say that affirmative action is racial discrimination by saying, well, we're not going to hire you because we have to hire him because he's black, and we need to make sure that we hit a certain quota of minority hires. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't see it that way. And I mean, some people that I do, I mean, there's some people I respect that don't see it that way. And then there's some people that I don't respect, that don't see it that way, that agree with Justice Brown Jackson. And one of the people that I do respect about it is Stephen A. Smith. Now, it's unfortunate that he has this opinion, because I would think that as a quote unquote independent, right, like he says he is, that he would kind of see this as for what it is. Like, and he even says in this video clip that we're going to watch here in a second that he even says, hey, the Supreme Court, the justices are right if you look at the law, but we're talking about the spirit of affirmative action. And it's like, I get what you're saying in the spirit of affirmative action, but that's not how it's being implied, right? Or employed, I'm sorry. Affirmative action needs to be employed as telling young minority children, you have an opportunity to get this job if you work hard. If you have the same grades as this person, you can get the job instead of them because, you know, you worked hard for it and blah, 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 right? We use affirmative action for that. If they're equal, but one is a minority, then giving them the job using affirmative action would be legitimate. And that's what it was supposed to be for. But then that's not what it was used. All of a sudden, everyone started going, whoa, well, we need to make sure that we don't get an affirmative action lawsuit against us for not having enough minorities. So we're going to start just hiring minorities, right? So, but I wanted to get into what Stephen A. says here in this video. So here, let's listen to what he's got to say.
53 to 69. That's the last time there was a liberal majority in the Supreme Court. Ever since then, albeit narrow, there's been a conservative majority in the court, and it was upheld. Because you had some Republicans that said it's the right thing to do. Because history taught us there was unfair and inequitable treatment afforded to the minority, specifically the black community in this country. And something needed to be done to right the ship to some degree, or even the playing scales. Now, some would argue you don't fight discrimination with additional discrimination. And the fair-minded amongst us understand that. And even
see, right there, right? So he understands, right? You don't fight discrimination with discrimination, and that affirmative action is, in a sense, discrimination, right? And so he gets it.
Even President Obama himself said affirmative action was not perfect, but it allowed generations of students like Michelle and me to prove we belonged. I'm appalled by the decision because of the insensitivity it wreaks, not the law. The law, it makes sense. You read the 14th Amendment, there's a legitimate argument by the conservatives to make that point. But in spirit, a lot is missing.
Okay, but that's the problem, Stephen A., is that in spirit, a lot is missing from how affirmative action is being applied now. So don't sit up on your high horse, right, and preach to the world that this is a bad decision, but you can understand it. And if you read the 14th Amendment, they have a legitimate argument, which basically means that you agree with the argument, but you don't like it because of what it does to the so-called, opportunities for the black community. When, if applied correctly, you would still have to work hard and prove that you belonged at that university, right? Now, there's some people who took advantage of affirmative action, and while they may have had the so-called smarts and the scores to get into a good school, to get them into Harvard is, a little bit, I don't know. But I mean, I remember I found this tweet from Vivek Ramaswamy, right? And it says, like me, at Joy Ann Reid, is a kid of immigrants from a foreign European colony who went to Harvard. Unlike me, she benefited from affirmative action because she counts as black and, in her own words, wouldn't have gotten in without it. She complains that her peers looked at her differently because of it. That's surely true. As or I just draw a different conclusion. There's no better way to foster racial dissension than to disadvantage others based on their skin color. Time to achieve colorblind meritocracy once and for all. Joy Reid talks about me on air, but hasn't yet had me on for a debate. From one alum to another, the offer stands. Now, in the video clip that I'm not going to play, but she goes on. She's like, I had good scores in this little school that I went to in Denver, and I got a recruiter to fly all the way out to recruit me because of affirmative action. And it's like, okay, so you mean to say that you couldn't have gotten where you are today if you went to the University of Colorado? That if she'd have gotten to one of those prestigious colleges, she couldn't have made it to MSNBC to be a, shill for propaganda. I mean, I'm pretty sure she still could have been on TV, even without going to Harvard. Just makes it easier when it says Harvard on her resume, right? But the funny thing about all of that, right? The funny thing about all of that is that I found that there was a poll done, and most Americans actually support the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action. So, here is this story from the Daily Wire. Most Americans support Supreme Court decision on affirmative action. Despite scenes of protest and statements of disapproval from the leadership of colleges and universities across the country, the majority of Americans are supportive of the recent Supreme Court decision restricting race-based college admissions. According to a new ABC News According to a new ABC News poll conducted after the High Court's decision on Thursday, 52% of Americans believe the ruling against Harvard University and the University of North Carolina's affirmative action policies was the right one. On the other hand, 32% of Americans disapprove of the decision, while 16% are unsure. ABC News reported. The poll found that the vast majority of Republicans, 75%, and most independents, 58%, agreed with Justices John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett on race-based admissions. Just 26% of Democrats feel the same way, according to the poll. Broken down along racial lines, most white people, 60%, think the decision was the right one, while 50% of Asians agree. Among Hispanics, 40% approve and 40% disapprove, and 50% of black people disapprove of the court's decision. However, the poll found that roughly 2/3 of Americans believe Asian and white students have a fair chance of admission into the college of their choice, while that number is 50% for Hispanics and 47% for black students, according to ABC. Most white Americans believe that people of all racial backgrounds have a fair chance to get into college of their choice. Compare that to black Americans, most of whom believe that black people have an unfair disadvantage. Similarly, a significant minority of Latino Americans believe people of their ethnic group have an unfair disadvantage. On Thursday, the court ruled that the race-based admissions program at Harvard violated Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and the University of North Carolina violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The court voted 6-3 in the University of North Carolina case and 6-2 in the Harvard case. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, a Harvard graduate and former Harvard board member, recused herself from the Harvard case. Hundreds of universities that consider race in admissions and scholarship decisions will now have to find non-race related ways to replace affirmative action. The poll also discovered that more Americans than not support the Supreme Court striking down President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan last week. 45% of Americans backed the court's decisions, while 40% believed the president had the authority to forgive federally subsidized student loans. Additionally, 43% of Americans believe the Supreme Court had the right to call in 303 Creative LLC versus Alinas, which ruled that Lori Smith could not be forced by state civil rights law to design websites that run counter to her sincerely held religious beliefs. 42% of Americans believe that was the wrong decision, while 14% said they don't know, that the poll found. Look, basically, a majority of Americans agree with the Supreme Court's decisions. And as we implement these decisions and we watch the country kind of get back to normalcy through some of these rulings, we're going to see a shift. Now, right now, we are on a cusp. And if we're not careful, they're going to push the right buttons. And it's going to cause a very, very serious conflict within this country. And we're not going to have time to fight a conflict outside of this country, even though there's going to be one as well. We need to be careful. And we need to figure a way to continuing this success in combating the left and their racial identity politics without fighting the left, at least physically, right? We can argue with them all we want, but we cannot be fractured to the point where we physically fight. And we're close. We're close. It's only a matter. It's only going to take one wrong push, one wrong statement, one wrong judgment or ruling or one thing. That's all it took in the first American Revolution, right? The shot hurled around the world. So it's only a matter of time before that happens again. We just need to make sure that if and when it does, that it wasn't because of infighting here, that it was something else. I don't know what we're going to do. At that point, I think we may lose it all. And that's unfortunate. But I want to know what you guys think. Was the Supreme Court right? Should they have stricken down Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness? Because I believe so. And what do you think about affirmative action? Was it racial discrimination to begin with and should have never been allowed to happen? Was the Supreme Court right for ruling the way they did? Do you agree with it? No? If no, tell me why. Leave it down in the comments down below. I really want to engage with my viewers, so please leave a comment. Smash that like button if you like the video. Share this content on all social media platforms. Those interactions are going to help me get more impressions, and that's how we're going to grow this channel. I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and I will catch you later. Peace.